Hi, welcome everybody to Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with our regular host here, Bob Rose. How you doing, Bob?
I'm hanging in there, Alan. I hope you're doing well.
Oh yeah, I am. I am. Hey, so I don't know if you got to see any of the show last week because I know you had family stuff for Christmas and everything else. But I gave an update on Sean. Basically, Sean's out of ICU. He's in a hospital and rehab, basically, because he cannot breathe on his own. He
Oh,
has a tube in his mouth. It gets taken out occasionally, but he needs to have it a lot because I think I talked to his son about it, and I think it's probably an after effect of the smoke
hmm
inhalation of from the fire. So he has struggle with air capacity in his lungs. The good news, though, is he did not have to have his fingers and thumb amputated.
great.
Um, I thought that's what was going to happen, but they were able to save him. So that's a huge plus. And so I told everybody as soon as he is able to breathe and talk and all that stuff, we're going to get him back on the show just for a little while, just to tell everybody hi. And
Yeah,
I'm asking everybody as always to continue to pray for him, that he gets out of this. Um, Back to health. And I mean, he's had so many health problems in his life. This is just one more thing. We're praying for you, Sean. Hope you get well very, very soon. The other thing I found out was that his apartment was not a total loss. The fire apparently is contained to the kitchen area. So the good news there is he didn't lose everything. So,
good.
oh, look, my niece is actually in my house and she's texting me now from uh from the other room. So hey, Genevieve. Um, so anyway, Saints won. They now lead the all-time regular season series against the Falcons, 54-53. And as I wrote my good, bad, and ugly, what makes that so impressive is you got to realize the Falcons had from 1960, well, 1970, when we were actually put together in the same division, to 2005, the Falcons had a 10-game winning streak, a
hmm
6-game winning streak, and a 7-game winning streak against the Saints. Um, the Saints' longest winning streak was during the Jim Mora years prior to Sean Payton of 6 games. So, for Sean Payton to go, I think I figured it, he was like 25 and 4, 21 and 4, something like that against the Falcons. It's just amazing
hmm
because Falcons haven't been terrible during all of Sean Payton's tenure.
No,
You know, they were very good. They went to a Super Bowl, all that. And yet the Saints were able to beat them, even when they had some of the worst Sean Payton teams, like in 2012. So that was all that's a huge plus. I enjoyed it. I
it
enjoyed it.
it is, and I mean it's been such a rough year. If you're a Saints fan, probably if you're a New Orleans Saints player, it's the type of season. Yeah, I know they're still mathematically eliminated. Hi Genevieve, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas to all of you, as a matter of fact. Um, but where was I? Oh, yeah, it's the type of season. Yeah, I know they're still mathematically alive. For the playoffs, and the best scenario isn't as far fetched as some might have you believe. But for the most part, it's going to be the type of year that you look back on and you grasp at small victories. And I think the season sweep of the Falcons, evening up the all-time series if you count that playoff loss, taking the 1 game lead in the regular season series, all those things. Those are going to be some of a couple of the things to hang your hat on for the year, because you never want to lose to a rival. You hear people joke all the time. I don't care if we go 2-14. Well, now it'd be 2-15, as
Mhm.
long as those 2 wins are, in this case, against the Atlanta Falcons.
Absolutely.
I'm hoping that's not the feather that saves Dennis Allen's job. That's a conversation for another day. But it was certainly nice to get the victory.
So you know, I had a house full of people, so I wasn't watching the game as closely as I typically do when I'm watching by myself, obviously. Um, they jump out to that fast 14-0 start. Ritter looked like a late round draft pick
Mhm.
quarterback up there. I think he only ended up with 79 yards passing anyway, but I mean, he was missing everything. Um, so they really had no passing game to speak of. Um, I felt this entire game changed, or the tenor of the game changed from the moment that David Johnson fumbled after getting that first down. It looked like they were going to go up at least 17, not 21-3. And it seemed, even though the Falcons punted on that possession, it was like the offense never could get that kind of traction again, where they were just picking the Falcons apart. I
That's
mean,
yeah, that's the way I felt. And yeah, really three first half drives after those two touchdown drives. You got the feeling, and I actually predicted coming into the game that New Orleans would blow them out, and it looked like it was trending that direction. And then you have a drive where they have a 2nd and inches. Kamara gets stuffed for a loss, then the false start, then a sack. A microcosm of the Saints season right there in that drive. Then you have the David Johnson fumble, which would have been short points. And then even the drive after that, Jarvis Landry dropping a 3rd down pass that would have been a 1st down, and forcing a punt. And then in the second half, the offense just went completely into a shell. Case in point, Andy Dalton threw 11 passes in the first half, and a lot of them they were attacking downfield. Second half, he threw 6 passes, 6,
yeah.
and a lot of those were check downs and dump offs. This team, the defense has been playing better, but this defense just flat out isn't good enough for you to just sit on a 14-point, well, really 11-point lead, because it was 14-3 at half. The defense is just not good enough in clutch situations for you to literally sit on the ball as they did in the second half. And that's on coaching. Again, microcosm of the Saints' problems for the season. That and just, completely atrocious run defense. You're looking at a 3rd and 13 for Atlanta, and they pick up 15, 16 yards on a draw play to a rookie 5th round draft pick. It's just this game. Yeah, I know it was a win, but it infuriated me nonetheless.
Yeah, I was frustrated with the run defense, especially the missed tackles. That's what I think they got. He got a lot of his yardage after contact.
Yep.
And that was what was more disturbing to me. When you see most of the time when the Saints give up a lot of yards rushing, it's usually their line is getting blown off the ball, and the runners are getting to the second level before somebody even touches them. Here you saw a lot of times Pete Werner shooting the gap and sliding off the tackle. I thought Demario Davis had one of his worst games as a Saint in this one, because there were at least 3 times where he had his hands on a guy and just slid right off. Desmond Ritter got some extra yardage,
Yeah.
and Cam Jordan has him in the backfield for a loss. It was a lot of that kind of stuff. And that was frustrating. Alante Taylor had an interception and just did not drag his foot. He did the college, 1 foot in. You saw a couple other guys, and Alante Taylor a couple times. He broke on one, and he had nothing but green grass in front of him, or green turf in front of him. And it was just that close. He just jumped. He was baiting that guy all the way. Saw that pass coming. He attacked the ball. I saw a couple other Saints defensive backs just have their hands on passes and not get the picks. The only pick they really got was the one at the end, where it was a tip drill, and the guy still had his hands on the ball. And another one, I think they punched the ball out. I think it was one of the turnovers. He had caught it on a cross. Yeah, that's what it was. That was a turnover.
Hmm.
He was running a crossing route. They Marcus May, I think, punched the ball out, and Roby got it, you know. You're right. The defense is not good enough because they don't make enough plays. They should have at least gotten 4 turnovers off this rookie
Yeah.
quarterback because he was playing so badly. Um, it's just it's frustrating because yeah, they do go into a shell too many times. They went to shell against Tampa. They kind of went
Hmm.
into a shell earlier in the season against a couple of teams. Tampa the first time they played them.
Hmm.
It's almost like I see Calvin. The thing with Pete Carmichael is sometimes I feel like he's got his play call sheet, and you look at that going, yeah, that ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work, and he ends up calling the same plays over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And um, I feel for him, but I also think about what Sean Payton said about Joe Brady when Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. You can know the offense, but the trick is to know when to call certain
Hmm.
plays. And I think he and Carmichael just don't have that feel to know when to call certain plays, to set the defense up for a certain play. Um, Good example of Sean Payton was a master at that. Good example of that is I've talked about this game before, but against Minnesota, here it's first and goal. They go into a formation because they saw on film that when the Vikings played the Giants and they got into this certain formation, every time they ran the tight end across in motion, the safety would come across and following because they knew that when you run the tight end in motion, he's going to go and be the lead blocker for an off tackle play. So here comes the safety to load the box to keep that play from happening. Well, Sean Payton said, well, when he does that, our wide receiver in the slot is going to be wide open.
Hmm.
So he set up that formation on the goal line. You see, I think it's Josh Hill go in motion, and then he even comes back and starts doing chop steps like he is going to go and set up for the off tackle run. Kamara's on that side. Kamara, when they do the play action, goes to that side. The defense, of course, collapses, but Breeze just 3 steps, boom, hits Michael Thomas wide open in the end zone. There's a touchdown right there. And that's just one of the most brilliant calls um, of Sean Payton, and it shows how he knows and is 3 steps ahead, knows what the other team is going to do before they even do it, and how to make them do what he wants them to do. And I'm sorry, I was going to leave that to you to respond.
No, you're exactly right. And not only that, Sean Payton, as far as offensive minds go, Sean Payton was so good at making halftime adjustments or in-game adjustments. Pete Carmichael, and this is what I thought would be a strength of his. Pete Carmichael was absolutely lousy at that. You once the Saints are figured out, they have been absolutely helpless against opponents this year, really on both sides of the ball. But Pete Carmichael isn't at fault for the defensive failures. But yeah, on both sides of the ball, I've just seen an appalling lack of adjustments. To what opponents are doing to them, or when opponents figure out what what the game plan was. None of these coaches have shown the ability to adjust on the fly.
I'm sorry, I lost your last comment there, Bob. What did you say? None of these coaches, what?
Uh, none of these None of these coaches have shown the adjustment, the ability to adjust on the fly. Pete Carmichael,
Yeah.
we're pointing the finger at him right at this moment, but the
Mhm.
defense has had just as many failures, and just as many, just as much inability to adjust to opponents during a game.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of it, there's so many things that have gone wrong for the Saints this year. I think I totally agree with you on the inability to make adjustments. I totally agree on the team just trying to do the most basic things because they're afraid to really make it too complicated because they make too many mistakes out there. I just feel like there's a combination also of injuries and age that's going into this game, or it's going on to this team, that people just are really underestimating because they want to put so much blame on Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael. And that's why I talked about, Demario Davis and Cam Jordan specifically, both of them not having the best years right now, because those are the guys you're kind of expecting to step up and make plays, and yet they're not there at key moments. And those are supposed to be your stars. And some people are going to say, well, it's because the guys just aren't, they're not inspired by a coach. They're not motivated by a coach. I don't really buy that, because Sean Payton's motivational techniques were more to keep the team level than it was to get the team pumped up to play a game. It's in like crises where the team had a lot of problems, and that's when he would really start motivating guys. Sean Payton enjoyed having the crisis of a loss, because that gave him the excuse to really get on the team. And that's what he learned from Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells was a master psychologist, and he would tell his coaches that I'm gonna be mean to you today. I'm gonna blame you for a lot of stuff when the players screw up, because his psychology was the player is going to see his coach getting chewed out because the player is the one that did a false start. The player is the one that ran the wrong route when he should have known what he was supposed to do. And my coach is getting yelled at for that. I don't want him to get yelled at anymore. So I'm going to try and do my job better, which is exactly what Parcells wanted. Because you can scream at a player all day long, he's just going to tune you out for a while. But if you make him feel like his position coach is getting him blamed for your problems, that motivates you. And I think some of that is not there for Allen, and I think and a lot of it's not there for the rest, for much of his staff. Not all of them. I think he does have some good coaches on his staff. I just think these guys just are not the guys you need at those important positions.
No, you're right. And like you pointed out, and I couldn't agree more. Yeah, Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael in particular deserve a fair share of the blame, but the players are the ones that are fumbling the ball. The players are the ones that are not committing penalties and not executing in key moments. And I'll agree with you about Cam and Demario only to a point. I still think that they are having good years. We are just so accustomed to them having great years. But your point about the stars letting the team down is definitely well taken. I mean, David Onyemata has been an invisible man for most of the year. Tyrann Mathieu, I didn't like the signing from the beginning. And I'll pat myself on the back for it. But nonetheless, Tyrann Mathieu is a multi-time Pro Bowl player. He has been a shadow of that, almost a caricature of that this year. Marcus May, he's had a slightly better year than Mathieu, but he's still not a difference maker when he's on the field. These are guys. I'm not going to blame Marshawn Lattimore because he's been hurt. Ryan Ramczyk. Has Ryan Ramczyk looked anywhere near the All-Pro form for really the last year and a half that he was his first 3 years in the league? No. We've talked about Kamara's shortcomings, be it both scheme, but I put that on Alvin Kamara too. You could call it lack of effort, lack of focus, just a general general bad year. Sometimes guys just have that. Whatever it is, Alvin Kamara is not the Alvin Kamara we're accustomed to seeing. We just rattled off. Onyemata has never made a Pro Bowl, and I'm not sure about May. But Matthew, Davis, Jordan, Ramczyk, Kamara. Those are 5 perennial Pro Bowl players, that have just not looked like themselves this year. And again, you could point to accountability in the coaches, sure, and that's part of it. But accountability has to come from those locker room leaders too, and it's not.
Yeah, that was something we talked a little bit about last week with Brendan. Your leadership in your locker room, there's a huge vacuum. You lost Drew Brees, you lost Sean Payton, you lost Malcolm Jenkins. Those were 3 huge voices in that locker room that said and commanded a lot of respect. So it's not that Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, and Alvin Kamara don't command the respect of the other players, but they're not. Those 3 so far have not been the guys who step up and hold other players accountable. You felt all the time that Sean Payton had his finger on the pulse of this team and had this team held those players accountable. You don't get that feeling from Dennis Allen.
No.
Especially in the press conferences, the post-game press conferences. Sean Payton, and it's not fair, but you shouldn't expect a guy to be just like the former coach. But Sean Payton had a way of saying things at a press conference, and you knew who he was talking about. And he was calling you out, but he wasn't calling you out. With a glare, a look. You made a mistake. Sean Payton's hunting you down on the sidelines to give you an earful, and that comes from him being around Bill Parcells, because Bill Parcells is the same way. And this is the hard part about replacing a legend. Phil Bankston had the same problem when he had to replace Vince Lombardi. When Bill Parcells left the Giants, Ray Handley took over the Giants team. The Giants team was not nearly as good the following year. And that Giants team in 1990 really played above their heads.
Yeah.
So the fall wasn't that unexpected, but Ray Handley was not Bill Parcells. And you could see that.
And it's interesting because, and I remember the Bill Parcells to Ray Handley transition very well. Bankston, I have to look in the NFL archives, but I've seen enough interviews of him. It's very interesting. You went from a fiery personality to no personality in Bankston. Similar kind of thing, transition from Parcells to Handley. And now we're talking, we're looking at a similar, I'm not trying to say Dennis Allen has no personality, but is very, very bland and lacks the intensity of Sean Payton at the very least. You brought up two great examples to compare to this one.
Yeah. And because I've been, well, everybody wants Sean Payton, Anna. I mean, everybody wants it. Well, the way the Cowboys are melting down, see, I didn't want this to happen. I really wanted the Cowboys to roll through and get in the playoffs, and then have the team fall apart. Because I really don't want Sean Payton over in Dallas, because that would sicken me. But anyway, they were talking about on Twitter and even on Facebook about they want to see Dennis Allen getting mad. They want to see Dennis Allen, throwing things and stuff like that. And I said, that was Jim Haslett. Jim Haslett did that. I got a picture of Jim Haslett after the Monday night game. I'm gonna have to post that one day before the show as the preview for the show. But it's after the Minnesota game in 2002 when Dante Culpepper got the touchdown and the 2-point conversion. He takes his headset off and is just throwing it, and it's just pissed off expression on his face. And Dante Stallworth is sitting there. If your buddy D, Dante Stallpepper, but Dante Stallworth is standing with this look on his face, like, I can't believe this just happened. But yeah, I mean, those, just getting pissed off and being a fiery personality. Ditka was pissed off and a fiery personality.
Right.
That make the team better. It's more about, if you're going to be that kind of coach,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to balance between looking like you're insane and out of control, but really being in control. uh,
Yeah. Ask anybody who I've ever coached, and they'll tell you. But yeah, I get it. And look, and you've pointed this out many times before. Dennis Allen is not that type of personality. He is not the personality to go absolutely ape shit on the sidelines. But that's okay. You don't have to be that to be a good coach. But what you have to be is firm in your message and commanding of respect. And that's what we're talking about, folks, that we're not seeing from these New Orleans Saints and Dennis Allen.
Yeah, I'm getting told I'm frozen at times.
Yeah, you are, but I can hear you all right.
Yeah, I know. I have a feeling I have a lot of people on my Wi-Fi, and that could be part of it. So we'll see. We'll see. As long as you can hear me, I'm not frozen on my end, but that, it's whatever. But here's a good example. Jim Mora. Jim Mora was a player, a coach that did not rant and rave on the sideline. Actually, he's pretty damn stoic on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
He'd sit there with his arms folded and just stare. He'd wait until the post game and go off.
Yeah.
And that's where he went off on the media. And that's where his personality came out. And that's so, but Jim Moore is his second most successful head coach in Saints history. So there's been all kinds. And you have to kind of find where you fit in as a coach, and then what kind of team are you going to assemble to get the kind of player that the kind of coach player relationship that you want to be the personality of your team. And I'm thinking about Bum Phillips. Bum Phillips wanted his country Texas Cowboy kind of players, and that's what he had. And he had guys that looked like that would show up at a cook-off, Texas chili cook-off. That's what his players were like. Jim Moore was much more militaristic, much more defensive oriented, and that was a reflection of his team. You look at those teams; those players were disciplined and reflected his personality. So, okay, so these messages probably aren't popping up. Teague Masters says, Teddy Bridgewater or Taysom Hill as starter next year. I also don't think either one. And the Falcons destroying my Wi-Fi, they're mad. I don't think, honestly, that Taysom Hill will ever be the starting quarterback. I think Taysom Hill is showing you pretty much what he should do. He threw two very nice passes in the game, and those are the kinds of things that he has to do to keep those running plays honest.
Yeah.
I think that the key for the Saints is to find the kind of quarterback who's going to reflect the personality of hi Daisy, reflect the personality of what kind of team he wants to build. And that's why I think a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo's name will come up a lot, but Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe a Teddy Bridgewater, but you're not. If you go for a Teddy Bridgewater, I'll be honest with you, that means you're drafting somebody.
Yep.
Because Teddy Bridgewater is basically a younger version of Andy Dalton.
Yep.
And if you go with Andy Dalton, then you're definitely drafting a quarterback again, because Andy Dalton, he can be your starter for a little while. But if he is going to be your starter long term, the longer he's out there, obviously we're seeing the drawbacks you have to an Andy Dalton, and Andy Dalton really hasn't been playing that badly. He's just not been a playmaking quarterback.
Right.
He is going to go 20 of 22 or 20 or 28 for maybe a buck 50, 220, maybe a touchdown, but he's not going to throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns in a game. That's not Andy Dalton's kind of game. He is the epitome of a game manager. And the only way you're going to get for this team to really get an impact quarterback is in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to see who comes out in the draft, but secondly, how these guys are rated. Hendon Hooker, everyone seems to think is going to fall to the second round because of his knee injury and his age. I mean, he'll be 26 next year. I've jokingly said if the Saints draft Anthony Richardson, because his nickname is AR-15, then by law, Alvin Kamara has to change his jersey number to 47 because we have to have AR-15 and AK-47 in the backfield. That's the only way I'm going to enjoy that. I may not enjoy the fact they don't win very much, but I want AR-15 and AK-47 in the backfield. You're right, Calvin. You're not winning anything with a game manager. You're not. You can only win.
Not with this team. No. There's not enough. This is not the San Francisco 49ers roster. Mm-hmm. And I know to those of you that are fans of Garoppolo, he is a game manager. Brock Purdy is a game manager. This team that team wins as long as the quarterback doesn't beat them. And that's really the definition. And calling a quarterback a game manager, it was never meant to be a criticism. As a matter of fact, I remember anyway, that it was at one time in the late 70s and early 80s, it was actually meant to be a compliment. And the term gunslinger on a quarterback, that was the one that was meant to be the criticism. Because Chuck Noll would always talk about Terry Bradshaw in that manner, especially earlier in Bradshaw's career. He needs to be more of a game manager. Why? Mm-hmm. Because Noll viewed that Steelers roster, and it was tough to argue with that. Noll viewed that Steelers roster as we can win games as long as the quarterback doesn't lose it for us. This Saints team is not that good, and they're more than just a couple of pieces away from being that good. So, and this is the point you were making, Alan. I'm just long-winded about it. Teddy Bridgewater and Andy Dalton, Daniel Jones, some of the Geno Smith, some of the other quarterbacks that could be available on the free agent market. They grab any of those, and I think any of them is a strong possibility. It's only because that's going to be a bridge quarterback, a temporary solution, while they get a draft pick ready. Be it, Hendon Hooker, Bo Nix surprised me. He's staying in school. But there are a couple other guys that I think will be in range, middle of late first round, or perhaps fall to the second round for the Saints to either move and go get, without costing them an arm and a leg, or that, they can stand pat if they end up with a high pick. Where a guy will fall to him, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. But that's just a synopsis of the position right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that about gunslinger versus game manager. That was one of the knocks on Joe Namath. If you watch America's Game Super Bowl III, the '68 Jets, they're pissed off at Namath because Namath is throwing the ball over the field. Mm-hmm. And Walt Michaels, who was the defensive coordinator, and a very young Buddy Ryan, who was I think he was either the linebackers or defensive line coach, was, had it out for Joe. They were like, you've got to stop throwing the ball. Trust your defense. Hand the ball off. We have too good of a defense for you to be costing us games with 5 interception games and 4 interception games. And the same thing happened with the Steelers in the early 70s. This was a discussion I got into in Facebook groups, NFL 70 to 79. Every so often they bring up Jefferson Joe Gillum. and talk Jefferson Street Joe Gillum, and they talk about him and his potential and how he was a player ahead of his time. And in many ways he was,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the reasons why he got benched for Terry Bradshaw, well, Terry Hanratty, then Terry Bradshaw, one of the reasons he got benched was because he was throwing the ball too much.
Yep.
And Noel's like, you've got a great running back in Franco Harris. You have a great defense that's forming. You are costing us games by you putting the ball in the air way too much because we're not at that point yet. This is not the kind of team that we are. So yeah, that was the knock, the gunslinger, and then here comes Dan Marino, and I don't want to just blame Marino because it was a whole class of '83, Elway, to an extent Jim Kelly, although Kelly
Mm-hmm.
comes later because he spends time in the USFL. But these guys start showing you, hey, I can throw the ball over the yard.
Yep.
And the rules now, and you can even go back to Dan Fouts in '78, but the rules are now that it's beneficial for a quarterback to throw the ball over the field.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the gunslinger now became a positive and the game manager became a negative.
Yep.
It's Avery. I know Avery's pushing Dalton, and he's saying that Dalton can keep you competitive for cheap, and I get that. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing with Dalton, though, he's an older player, but you can win short term with an Andy Dalton like player if your defense can get better, if your running game can get better, because that's what the Tennessee Titans are built like.
Yep.
The Tennessee Titans are built around a strong running game and a strong defense. Hell, Jim Moore was trying to do that with the Saints.
Yep.
He wanted Bobby Hebert to be a game manager, and unfortunately, Bobby Hebert waited to the playoffs to make all his mistakes.
Right.
But and even Bill Parcells' Giants teams, and you look at the '86 Giants and the '90 Giants, they were both built on defense, running game. Phil Simms and Hofstadler were both game managers for those teams. It's just that's the kind of philosophy these teams are.
I mean, hell, even Troy Aikman, 3-time Super Bowl winner, Joe Theismann and and Doug Williams for the Redskins teams. Not so much Mark Rippon, but Aikman, Theismann, Williams. They were all middle of the pack as far as passing yardage and passing production because those teams were built on defense, running the football, and making big plays once you establish the run. With Rippon, the '91 Redskins, they threw the ball a little bit more, and then we saw Favre in '96. At Elway, you pointed out class of '83. Elway didn't win his rings until they got a running game and a consistently physical defense. And we're seeing. You look now. The Washington the 2022 Washington Redskins, they're having success with running game defense. The Giants, before they went into their slump, Daniel Jones is going to be allowed to hit the market because he's not a difference-making quarterback. They're winning and turning things around with a young defense, athletic defense, and a running game. And we could go down the list. So if you don't have that all-star franchise superstar quarterback, that's the way you have to win. The problem is the Saints, they don't have either right now.
Yeah. Well, the Saints were built around an all-star superstar quarterback.
Yeah.
And everything rotated around his ability. You had very average receivers because you had a quarterback who'd elevate those average receivers. You had a good running back, and unfortunately his sidekick got old, and you lost the Thunder and Lightning backfield to help an aging superstar quarterback. And you put a defense together that was good enough that your superstar quarterback could make the plays and turn the game into a type of game that this defense was built to stop. So now, and this is why I said, even with Sean Payton, yeah, Sean Payton probably could squeeze out 2 or 3 more wins with this roster. You're probably in a much better position to win this division and go to the playoffs with a Sean Payton coach team.
Yeah.
Because he's going to make the calls that Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen aren't making. But how far is this team going to go in the playoffs, even with Sean Payton? They're not going to go very far because they're too limited in a lot of positions. So this is the challenge for any coach to come in. And maybe Dennis Allen isn't the right guy. He didn't want to really bring back Pete Carmichael, and Carmichael really didn't want this offensive coordinator job.
No, he didn't.
4 other people. I think Carmichael understands his limitations, which is why I think, regardless of what happens to Allen, Carmichael is going to retire at the end of this season, just because you need a guy with an offensive philosophy. How are you going to run this team? I always felt that Ditka's biggest problem, well, one of his many problems, but one of Ditka's biggest problems was hiring Danny Abramowitz as an offensive coordinator. Because you were trying to run plays, and Jim Everett will even talk about this. That's why Jim left. He's trying to run plays that have been out of the playbook for decades.
Yep.
Ditka was trying to bring in basically the Dallas Cowboys offense of the 70s. And there are elements of Dallas's offense from the 70s all over the place. The multiple motion, the shotgun, all that stuff is there. But you can't run a pure version of that offense anymore. Even if you could find another Roger Staubach, another Tony Dorsett, because teams have caught on to that. There's a reason why nobody runs the flex defense anymore. There's a reason why you don't have true 3-4 defenses anymore. You have more hybrids. I will not stand for the Ditka slander. Yeah. So that was some of the issues. Some of the many issues with the team, and the fundamental issue with Ditka, he had no quarterback. All the quarterbacks he brought in were no good. Even the ones he drafted weren't any good. We're going to talk about some of those young players because I don't want to be totally negative the whole time. But my point was, and we didn't get to talk about this, you and I, Bob, but we talked a little bit about it last week, Brennan. Sean Payton dangling the thing out there. I might be interested in coming back. There was no Walter Payton 2.0. The Walter Payton 2.0 was supposed to be Ricky Williams.
Yeah.
And it's not a fair comparison, but it is what Bum Phillips thought when he drafted George Rogers. He was going to be Earl Campbell 2.0. He wasn't. And it's not a fair thing for him to expect him to be Earl Campbell 2.0. Earl was unique. Walter Payton was very unique. You're not supposed to be using a comparison, but yeah, Walter Payton was probably, arguably, depending on who you talk to and what generation you're from, the greatest running back to ever play the game. I mean, I'm still got Jim Brown probably ahead of him, only because Jim Brown is the ruler that you measure everything else against. But if I have my top 3 greatest running backs to ever play the game, I'm doing Jim Brown, Walter Payton, and Barry Sanders. Probably because those are 3 unique running backs who completely dominated the league in a way that most people never did. Barry Sanders, I'm saying you dominated the league in terms of his agility. How he could make something out of nothing. You're going to get him for losses, but he's eventually going to break something, break a big run, break 2 or 3 big runs. It was the main reason why I liked watching the Lions on Thanksgiving, to see Barry Sanders come out and spin some guy into the turf, Jim Brown was power, and Walter Payton just unbelievable. His balance and his strength, his knee bend. He would kick those knees up, and he would do that pony kick sometimes when he break in the open field, and it was just amazing to watch.
See, for me, my top three guys, I reversed 1 and 2. I went Walter Payton, Jim Brown, only because Walter Payton could do more on a football field. Jim Brown was probably the most dominant player in the aspect that he did best ever to live. But I go Walter Payton, Jim Brown, and I'm going to take prime Earl Campbell. Because the Houston Oiler Earl Campbell, 78, 79, 80, my God, I was convinced he was going to kill, and I was a little boy at the time, but I was convinced he was going to kill someone on the football field.
Boy, I was 10, 11, 12 years old when those years of Earl Campbell. And my dad did a lot of business with guys from Houston. So we got a lot of Houston Oilers stuff getting sent to us. The Love You Blue signs, the Houston Oilers song, and I can remember hearing that song and seeing the pom-poms and the Love You Blue signs, and just the sea of blue in an era when NFL properties was not selling jerseys, was not selling team-colored shirts. You were lucky. You had to go to Sears, and most of it was for kids to wear to get NFL licensed apparel. And yet, here's the Astrodome. And the Astrodome back then, most does, in the upper decks, had those god-awful Astros colors of brown and orange and yellow, and stripe all the way through. But it's a sea of blue, and you all see him shaking the pom-poms to Houston Oilers. That song, Houston Oilers #1, and and then Earl Campbell come out those tree trunk legs, and it's just it was amazing. And young kids, they ask me about who Earl Campbell was and what he did. I always pull up the same footage. Or Isaiah Robinson. He gets it every time. I'm like, you got to see this run. And when he puts his helmet in the chest of Isaiah Robinson of the Rams, this is Earl Campbell. This is who this man was. So, he did. He did run the hell out of George Rogers. What was wrong with George Rogers? Yeah, he was injured a lot, but he couldn't stay away from cocaine. That kind of doomed him with the Saints, and Bum was loyal to Earl to a fault. And we brought in worn down Earl Campbell, because running backs only have so many carries in them, and after a while their bodies start breaking down. And it happened to Dalton Hilliard. It happened to Reuben Mays. It happened to Larry Johnson of the Chiefs. It happened to Jamal Anderson of the Falcons. Jamal Anderson of the Falcons, their Super Bowl run, he had over 400 carries in a season. Something ridiculous. Like Larry Johnson had something like that too. Leave my Astros alone. So I can respect Earl Campbell. I think the fact that he didn't have as long a career is probably why I don't have him in my top three. Same reason I don't put Gale Sayers in there. Sayers was somebody special, but Gale Sayers was not the guy that had that long career, and that was probably his negative thing. So, okay. Speaking of Jim Brown and the Browns, Saints are going to play the Browns, and the Saints traditionally have not matched up well with the Browns. You go back to Dick era, who gave the Browns, the expansion Browns, their first win. Unfortunately, we did. After running Ricky Williams 40 times, we
John Butler's friend, Mike Ditka.
The Saints' first win of the 2006 season was against the Browns. But they lost in 2010 against the Browns in one of their worst games. They lost in 2014 versus the Browns in one of their worst games that revealed that maybe there's something wrong with Rod Ryan's defense.
Yeah.
That game, the communication problems in that secondary. I know in the 70s, the Saints did not play well against the Browns. I think,
No.
let me see, what game is it? Yeah, it's the 75 Saints in old Cleveland Municipal Stadium, getting the hell kicked out of them. So, yeah, I mean, the Saints traditionally have not matched up well with the Browns. And I don't think they're going to match up well with the Browns this year. And the Browns are 6-8, so they're not like they're that much better than the Saints.
Right.
So, how do you see this game getting played out?
Weather is going to be a big determinant in this game, and believe you me, I'm supposed to drive up to provide coverage, media coverage for it. I plan on driving up the morning of Saturday morning, then driving back as soon as all of our media stuff gets wrapped up. So,
Rob Ryan slander.
So yeah, I am praying that the weather report is wrong. Basically, what they're calling for, and you got to understand, you're talking on the shores of Lake Erie. I grew up a little bit south of Lake Erie on the Pennsylvania side, so I'm very used to lake effect snow, lake effect changes. Early in the week, the forecast was for up to 13 inches of snow with about 1.5 inches of ice thrown in. That has subsided a little bit, but it's still forecast to be about up to 8 inches of snow. The question is, when is it going to happen? Wind chills possibly in the double-digit minuses. Good segue, Jimmy Gumbo. It could be -9 to -15 at kickoff time, with the regular temperatures in the single digits. In a situation like that, two things are concerning to football players: footing and wind. You're talking about a quarterback in Deshaun Watson for the Browns, who has not played very well at all. He's not gotten himself into a rhythm yet. John Butler, you're right. The Saints are actually flying out on Thursday, as opposed to Friday, because they're watching the weather too, and they plan on meeting or trying to beat the storm. And get into Cleveland before it hits. Nonetheless, the Cleveland Browns offense, Deshaun Watson or no Deshaun Watson, they're built to beat you up. A big physical offensive line, really 3 very talented running backs, but they lean on Nick Chubb, who's among the NFL leaders in rushing. And that's how they do it. They only ask their quarterback. They've only been asking their quarterback to throw the ball about 18, 20, 22 times a game. That's where their comfort level is, because Chubb has been beating you. And on defense, the numbers aren't pretty for the Browns, and they have all kinds of injuries in their linebacking core. But again, it's a very physical defense that wants to force you into mistakes. They are extremely aggressive in attacking opposing backfields. So if you're a turnover-prone team, that's what they're that's what their system is kind of predicated on feasting upon. So I just running the ball on offense, predicated on forcing mistakes on defense. What have been the Saints' 2 biggest problems this year?
Yeah, exactly. When you start describing the weather, because it's the Siberian Arctic front that's coming through, and it's going to be below freezing for 4 days here in New Orleans too. It's going to be hard freeze in North Shore. It's going to be a freeze on both sides of the lake, and we will get down in the teens or the upper or the lower 20s Friday, and it's not going to get above freezing until Christmas Day, when it gets to 40 Christmas Day. So we're talking 4 consecutive days of freezing temperatures.
We're used to that up here. You guys stay safe down there. Like I said, I'm not looking forward to driving in what I'm apparently going to have to be driving in.
Yeah, well, the problem in New Orleans is all these houses are raised.
Right.
Mine's not, but so many houses are raised, and so you have a lot of exposed pipes below the house. So you have to get under the house and wrap them and do things to cut the wind, because that's what makes it worse. And if the pipes do burst, then you've got a frozen pipe that's full of ice that has to thaw before you can actually fix it. So if your
Hmm.
pipe bursts, say Friday, you can't really get out there till late Christmas afternoon when it gets warm enough to go and try and repair your pipe on Christmas Day. Merry friggin' Christmas. Shitter's full. um, yeah, so that's the real challenge. And I have a couple friends of mine that are going to have some issues. They're trying to figure out how they're going to do this because of that. Now, I'm still got to protect my pipes as best I can. I'm like I said, my house isn't above ground, but I have spigots out front. I have the sewage pipe out, that leads out to the street for the city and stuff. That all it's just PVC that's exposed, so I got to cover all that up. But yeah. Um, Calvin, I was driven up there. I'm allergic to snow.
So am I, Calvin, but I can't get out. They won't. They won't let me. They keep pulling me back.
The interesting thing is that Cleveland. We talk about the Saints doing Saintsy things. Cleveland, of course, does Cleveland things. It's not beyond the realm of possibility at 30-mile-an-hour winds that Cleveland comes out throwing the ball 15 and 20 times.
No, it's not.
So you're built to run the ball in this kind of weather. They're going to try and throw the ball. So don't put that past them either. But yeah, one of the things, and I think Nick Underhill talked about this today on Twitter. Why is the Saints run defense so bad? We've talked about a couple things like that on the show, defensive tackles. But and some of the players, the aging players you're counting on, Demario Davis has missed more tackles this year than he has in previous years. So it's not just the stretch plays and the outside plays that used to plague the Saints, where they would seal the edge, so the linebackers aren't getting to the sidelines fast enough. They're having success running inside, which used to be impossible. So how do you shore that up? What do you do to get that to fix that problem?
Well, I think what we'll see on Sunday or Saturday, excuse me, especially if the wind is going to be a factor, the Saints are going to probably both defenses are going to dare the opposition to throw the football, and by that I mean they're going to be bringing an extra safety down in the box. That extra guy for New Orleans is going to be Marcus May. May is going to have to make the plays in the box. But to stop a running attack like that, it's very simple. You have to win your matchups up front. All the strategy in the world doesn't mean a thing if you're getting interior penetration. And that's even the key toward to stopping stretch plays and off tackle plays, because if you get interior penetration, that forces a running back to alter their path to get outside. It cuts off it shuts off all cutback lanes, first of all, and secondly, like I said, it forces them to alter their path. That allows a defensive end or a safety to close in on that sideline route faster, and it allows the linebacker, be it Demario Davis, Caden Ellis, Pete Werner, whoever the case is, it allows them. It doesn't put as much instant predication on them being able to identify the play like that. It gives them a little bit, an extra half second or so, to make their reads. And if they're athletic enough, and all three of these guys are, that they can get to the sideline to cut off that path. So everything for the Saints has been keyed on interior pressure, interior penetration, or in this case, the lack thereof. Before Sunday's game against Atlanta, and I agree with you, Alan, Atlanta got their rushing yards in a different way than we've seen opponents get their rushing yards against New Orleans this year. Most of the year, it's been bam. They've been hitting that second level, nearly untouched because of the poor play of the tackles. But on Sunday against Atlanta, they were breaking and getting yards after initial contact. You hope that that's the way that the defensive tackles, who I think have been playing much better in the last 2 or 3, 4 weeks, if they can get that kind of penetration, especially on a slower track, because it's going to be slick. That's going to be a big advantage to the defense.
Yeah, the big thing I always say, and I know my family gets tired of hearing me say it, when we run to the outside, I'm like, turn the corner, because as a defense, what you want to do on those plays, no matter what it is, when they try and run the ball, unless they run up the middle, is you want to make that running back run sideways, east west instead of north south, because you have a better shot of making the tackle because they can't square their shoulders up and come at you. You want to just keep making them run to the edge, and use the sideline and eventually chase them out of bounds. But you have to set that picket fence where the secondary and the linebackers and the defensive end are all just stretching it out, and they're just flowing. And yeah, the cutback, you have to watch against the cutback, but if everybody is flowing in the same direction, it's hard to cut all the way back against the grain, because if you're running to the right, your left end should now seal off the backside. Yep. So if he tries to cut back, he's running back in the teeth of the defense, but you're flowing, so you're forcing this guy to continue to run outside till he ends up out of bounds, because he can never turn that corner. One of the things that used to drive people crazy about Reggie Bush was Reggie Bush kept looking for that corner, and he was thinking he was playing in the college level where you have such wide hash marks. You can get that corner because you can get to the edge before you ran out of sideline, ran out of field. When in the NFL, you're already in the middle of the field, so you pretty much cut the field in half on college players who are used to bouncing to the outside and using their speed to hit the corner. So that's good run defense, and I think that's what the Saints have to do with Cleveland, is force these running backs to go east-west instead of north-south, and do that by stretching these plays out. Do not let them have the cutback lane. Stay in your lane. Stay disciplined. Let the backs almost start coming to you. You don't attack the hole right away to make the play, because Underhill talks about how Pete Werner a couple of times shot the hole because he read it so quickly that he actually overplayed it and left the backside open because he didn't make the tackle right there. So you almost have to be a read and react kind of defense, where you're reading the play, and you're staying in your lane, staying in your gaps, using gap control defense, and keep that running back, make him keep looking for the hole, and eventually the defense catches up to him and brings him down, just via gang tackles. I agree with you, though. This is shaping up to be a fast game that they're going to run the ball a lot. I think this is a game where you're going to see the Saints run Kamara, David Johnson, and Emo Benjamin. I think is his first name. They're going to run all three of them, and you're going to see a lot of Taysom Hill.
I hope so. The wise man would come into this game with that kind of strategy.
Yeah, but I mean, I think when they're playing with the wind, that's when they'll throw the ball. But I think if they got to face a 30-mile-an-hour wind, this isn't old Cleveland Municipal Stadium, Mistake by the Lake, but it's pretty close because Mistake by the Lake had the open end zone.
Right.
And that's really what used to doom those, especially the Cardiac Kid Cleveland teams. I love Brian Sipe as a player, but I do know he did not have the strongest arm. And when the wind would pick up, and that's part of the reason why they lost to the Raiders in the 1980 playoffs, he's throwing into the wind, sprint, red right 88. Red right 88 was the play. And that ball, you can see it hang in the wind and it's fluttering, and that's what allowed I think it was McDaniel to pick it off.
Mike Davis.
Mike Davis. That's what Mike Davis. Yeah. But that's what kind of doomed that team because of those wind conditions. So that's how the Saints have to approach this game. Throw the ball when you're playing with the wind.
Yep.
When you're going against the wind, run the ball. This is when Gillikin's got to have his A game on, and that's another player who's been inconsistent for us.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got to be able to flip the field with these punts. Even if you're punting into the wind, you got to be able to power that ball with a punt.
Yep. Now, believe it or not, I actually think the Saints have the advantage at quarterback as far as throwing the ball. Now, what worries me is Deshaun Watson can make plays with his legs, but Deshaun Watson is not nearly as used to playing in this kind of weather as Andy Dalton. Because Andy Dalton, remember, spent most of it, Andy Dalton, folks, remember, spent most of his career in Cincinnati, off of, I don't know what it's called. I think it's called Paul Brown Stadium now, but the stadium is located right on two riverfronts. So they have a crosswinds problem there too, as the season turns into November and December. And Andy Dalton was still always very productive, mainly because, and again, he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but he knows how to throw in these conditions. And a lot of times that's just as key as just having the cannon for an arm that Watson does.
Right. And, that's part of the thing that, you really have to be careful of. Because Watson has not been playing well. But Watson, just because they're going into the wind, like I said, I would not be surprised to see the Browns, no matter what the which way the weather's going, thinking that Watson's going to be able to rocket that ball in there. So you can't just simply drop 9 in the box and dare him to run, because Watson's going to force it. He's going to take those shots. We have to get turnovers. It's a field position game. I'm talking about the punch. You have to get the turnovers, which is, again, what does this team not do well? But that being said, let's talk about a couple of the bright spots on the team. Alontae Taylor almost got his hands on about 3 passes. The one interception he thought he had, if he just would have realized he's dragged out of the foot, he probably gets his first interception of the game, of his career. I don't think Lattimore plays again this week. In fact, I don't think Lattimore is going to play for the rest of the season. I think they pretty much are going to shelve him unless the unthinkable happens. They win 3 games and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers continue their collapse. And then you have and then of course the Falcons and the Panthers also continue to lose, but which isn't beyond the realm of possibility.
Right.
You can have the Falcons win another game, hopefully against Tampa, but the Panthers have to lose all the rest of their games too, including when they play us the last week of the season. But that kind of talk aside, I don't think they're going to put Lattimore in there. I think this is the time they're going to go ahead and evaluate Alontae Taylor as an outside cornerback, because I think that's his job. And they could possibly think about moving on from Adebo, because Adebo is an outside corner, not an inside corner. If they think they can get value from him, because you need so many other pieces. Roby can play outside and inside. Not that I'm saying Roby's better than Adebo, but if someone is interested enough in Adebo and he's on a cheap rookie contract that you may be able to get some value for him, it's a possibility to look at. So you want to see how these 2 guys look out there to make a decision on that. How do you feel about Taylor?
Well, not only that, but what about the possibility of moving on from Marshawn Lattimore? If you can get a first-round pick for a top-flight cornerback, I'm not advocating it. Marshawn's one of my favorite players on the Saints, but yet another reason to see what you have in Taylor. And I completely agree. I think he is definitely one of the best bright spots for the Saints in 2022. He's playing spectacular football. I would like to see some better ball skills, something that we thought was a strength when he was at Tennessee. He's blown a couple of interception chances. And should have had an interception that was called back by an imaginary penalty on a different defensive back against San Francisco. But other than that, I love the physical style of play that he shows. He's a lot better in man coverage than I thought he would be. He's an extremely fluid athlete for his size. Got great instincts, and he does not shy away from the challenge of taking on the opponent's top receiver. I think.
Physical guy.
Yeah, what's that?
He's a physical guy.
Yes.
Dude, that's the other thing. He's very physical. He's not afraid to lay the wood on somebody. So that's another plus for him. And he really isn't like a rookie out there to me. I mean, I've seen a couple of bad plays, but not anything that I haven't seen from other cornerbacks out there. And I've noticed Chris Harris hasn't been out there at all anymore. They've got, now that Roby's back, it's pretty much set in the rotation. You've got Adebo and Taylor on the outside, Roby at the corner, at the nickel. Let's talk about a couple other good players. I love Taylor too. I think he is a huge bright spot. And I was not upset we drafted him. I was upset we missed out on the safety, the Baylor safety. I just blanked out on his name. My son is screaming it at me right now, but I don't remember his name. But he got picked right before Taylor. We picked Taylor.
JT something.
It was a guy I really liked out in the draft. As a good free safety. Rashid Shaheed. Here's a guy. God, I sound like Chris Collinsworth, but here's a guy. I mean, undrafted free agent, and we're comparing him to Deontay Harris, Deontay Hardy. As I told my son Sunday, Rashid Shaheed is a receiver who can return kicks, whereas Hardy is a kick returner who can play receiver. And I think that's a huge difference, because you really need him to be an effective player across the board. Michael Lewis could play some receiver, and he was a kick returner, but he could play a little receiver. Shaheed is showing he can be a receiver.
Yes.
And that's a huge step. I know a lot of fans are mad he was not getting enough touches early on, but this is an undrafted kid.
Right.
So his whole training camp, and he played at a small I'm sorry, he played BYU. I think he played BYU.
Weber State.
Weber State. Okay. But he's a small college kid who is not a draft pick. He's not ready to go like Olave. So I've been very happy with his development, his expansion of a role. I mean, he's pretty much shown that Jarvis Landry is a bust. Yeah. It was a bad signing, and he's pretty much kicked Landry to the curb. Landry barely gets out on that field now. He only comes out when they run 3 wides. And I think if they could find somebody else who's better than Landry, they'd play him at this point. But Shaheed is out there a lot as the number 2 guy. They've deactivated Callaway a couple of times to put Shaheed out there. So what's your impression of Shaheed?
Oh, I love Rashid Shaheed. I love the fact that he's earned these reps. The Saints receiving core is just plain bad outside of Olave. But what I love Rashid's athleticism. I saw that during the preseason. But what I saw, and we all saw it during those first 2 touches that went for long touchdowns. The biggest difference between him and Deontay Harris. Deontay Harris has the skills of a solid, we'll call him a number 3 wideout. He has good route running ability, good, reliable hands, nice vision. Deontay Harris doesn't have the body for that in today's NFL, which is a shame because I love Deontay. Rashid Shaheed does. And what I was most impressed at the Pittsburgh game, and if you look back, Shaheed he only got, I think, 2 targets in the game. But he runs routes. He has very precise route running skills, which surprised me coming from such a small school, and really not getting any reps at all early in the year. And not only that, I saw the one play against Pittsburgh, and I've seen it since. He is, when Andy Dalton has to break containment, Rashid will work his way back to the quarterback, not just break off his pattern and run back. He works his way through traffic back to the quarterback. That is the mark of a seasoned veteran. You can't teach. It takes time to teach that kind of thing, and only a select handful of guys have that kind of a natural ability, like ingrained in them. And it's those small nuances that I love to see out of Shaheed. He's starting to get more targets, like you pointed out. Because obviously Traquan Smith is what he is. Marquez Callaway has regressed badly. And Jarvis Landry is just, he's a body at this point. He got old fast. Another signing I didn't like at the time. So I do love the fact, I haven't loved many things that this offense has done this year, but I love the fact that they have worked Shaheed into a regular role, and he and Olave, who, by the way, folks, may not play this week because of a hamstring. You don't want to mess around with a hamstring in cold weather. So, that being the case, we're going to get to see even more of Shaheed, and I don't see how you could dislike what you've seen so far.
Right. I mean, so that means you're going to have to rely a lot on Landry as your possession guy, and Shaheed and Callaway probably as your other receivers.
Yes.
Traquan Smith is pretty much vanished. He comes out as the 4th receiver. And I'd be surprised if he's even on this team next year, honestly. I think this receiving core is going to have more turnover. And, Landry will be gone. I'm guessing probably Traquan Smith will be gone. I don't know about Callaway. I have to see who else they bring in before I'm ready to write off Callaway. Not that he's deserved a spot, but you're talking about 5, 6 receivers. He's probably your 5th guy right now, depending on what you bring in. I don't think Michael Thomas is. We have seen the last of Michael Thomas. I think Thomas, they're going to try. They can't afford to get rid of him right now, but they're going to try and bring him back and see what happens from there and make a decision after that. But he has to show a season where he's healthy. So, I think this is a position just as much as quarterback that's going to see a lot of turnover next year, regardless who the coach is. Whether it's Allen or they bring in someone else, you're going to see a turnover in that position. Any other bright spots that you've seen this season? I mean, Ruiz just went on IR, so that was one of the bright spots on the offensive line. Any other positions that you're kind of going, oh yeah, look at this guy?
I mean, you certainly got to talk about Caden Ellis, and I love the fact that this guy is performing so well. They are using him wisely. His best attribute has always been a downhill defender. You don't want him in coverage. It's not a strong suit like Demario Davis or Pete Warner. So they took the leash off of Caden Ellis and said, go get the ball. He's done so very well. But again, a lot of people have been talking about Caden, and rightfully so. The guy for me, I'll go back on offense, Juwan Johnson. And I mentioned this with Jordy Haltberg earlier today. Alan, I'm a fan big fan of these teams growing up, and I don't want to pump him up with too much hyperbole, but Juwan Johnson is built and is very athletically similar, and you watch him run routes, and it kind of is reminiscent of Shannon Sharp and the way the Denver Broncos use Shannon Sharp.
I knew you were going there, but no.
I knew you knew. And I'm not, listen, Shannon Sharp had a hell of a career, a top 3 tight end of all time, and in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying Juwan Johnson is any of that, but Juwan is legitimately the second most consistent pass catcher next to Olave for this offense, and he's developed. Yeah, remember this is a college wide receiver who's only playing his second year at tight end. He's improved his blocking well enough where he could stay on the field in all situations. Andy Dalton has trust in him, and he is just a terrific runner after the catch. And he's very confident in his hands. Again, I'm not saying he probably will never even be a Pro Bowler, but it's nice to see him develop into a legitimate threat for this position.
Skip Bayless says Tom Brady's a better tight end. I gotta take my glasses off for that one, you know. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think Juwan Johnson, he has exceeded my expectations. I had Boo Williams as his ceiling, and he has surpassed Boo Williams. You know, he has become a better blocker. He's still not quite built like a tight end.
No.
He is built like a receiver still, but he is showing the ability that you need to see in a tight end to be that pass catching tight end that you have no problem putting him out there. And I don't worry about him fumbling the ball or you know, I just jinxed him, I'm sure, but I don't worry about him blowing a play. You know, he's a leading touchdown pass catcher right now in this team. He has good run after the catch. I think he's deceptive run after the catch.
Yeah,
now, he's not going to mistake anybody for Jimmy Graham or Rob Gronkowski or Travis Kelce or any of those guys, but he is a guy who can help you right now and get this offense moving, especially if you're limited in your pass catching receiving options to begin with. And like you said, he's not a hindrance in the running game. So it's not like, okay, Bob, did you see the Ronnie Hillman story?
I did. I don't think he's died yet, but I know he's in hospice. I knew he was, the team had announced that he was sick last year. I don't remember with what, but it was terminal. And then you didn't hear much about it. And Ronnie made some appearances at a couple Broncos team events, and then all of a sudden went downhill. If it hasn't happened already, I know it's just a matter of time. But yeah, it's a sad story because I think the guy's just in his 40s tops.
I don't know much about him. What had happened or what's going on with him?
Alan, I don't remember. I know Ronnie had allegedly had some chemical abuse problems. Shortly that surfaced shortly after his career was over. I don't know if that had anything to do with what's going on with him right now. And like I said, when the team announced that he was sick last year, I don't recall off the top of my head because the Broncos franchise has disgusted me for years, so I stopped following them like I used to. But Ronnie Hillman was a big time player for liver cancer. Okay, thank you, John. Which made sense if any of the substance abuse rumors were true. Obviously, those of you that know of people that have had addiction issues, that's not the only cause of liver cancer, but it's number 1, 2, and 3 on the list. And certainly prayers out to Ronnie Hillman's friends and family. I know that the ex-Bronco player fraternity is a strong one. So his loss or pending loss will be felt pretty strongly.
Well, every time I hear about a young running back or young player dying, especially running backs, I think about Ricky Bell. That's somebody always comes to mind because he died at 29, heart disease, and he was one of those guys that Um, we didn't understand, especially a lot about some players' health and things like that. And we to see guys die at a young age, it surprises you because you don't quite understand what they do in their life to have this problem. Here Ronnie Hillman here has liver cancer. Okay, so people understand cancer. I think this is also true for injuries in general. Um, People understand torn ACLs. People understand diseases or illnesses like that. But when something unusual happens to a player, whether it's heart disease, whether it's enlarged heart, ALS, those kind of things that impact a younger player, it's kind of like what happened? Well, how is this developed? Leukemia, I know is blood cancer, but I also think about what was his name now? The running back from Syracuse, the Express. They made a movie called The Express. He was supposed to replace Jim Brown with the Cleveland Browns.
Not Leroy Kelly.
No, Ernie Davis. Ernie Davis.
Yes.
Ernie Davis. And the Browns drafted because Paul Brown and Jim Brown had come to a point where their relationship couldn't go any further. Jim Brown was too strong-willed to be coached like Paul Brown still coached at that time, where he thought all the players were used to military discipline, chain of command. I'm the general. You're the infantry. You do what I say because I'm the general. Well, Jim Brown doesn't do that. Jim Brown was his own man, and Jim Brown wanted to have more of a say on how this offense could be. And unfortunately, who lost that battle ended up being Paul Brown. When Art Modell bought the team and he fired Paul Brown. So, that's one of the things that I think about, that because Paul Brown talked about drafting Ernie Taylor, but he developed leukemia right after he was drafted. Ernie Davis, and Paul Brown said at one point, this is also one of the reasons why Art Modell fired him. He was still healthy enough to play, and Paul Brown says, "I'm not playing him. He's not in football shape. I'm not going to play him." And he was a first-round draft pick, and Modell just couldn't understand that. You play this guy, he's not sick yet. He may beat this. We gotta play him, and Paul Brown just wouldn't do it. And that was one more nail in Paul Brown's coffin with the Cleveland Browns. So the Cleveland Browns are a very interesting team. I encourage everyone to watch the history of the Browns. First off, any NFL films on the history of the Browns. Fascinating team, but also watch A Football Life, the Paul Brown story, because Paul Brown is the father of modern football. And a lot of people really don't know the things that Paul Brown invented and created. This is the way football is played today. Watching film, developing a playbook, drawing up plays and putting it in a book where the players studied it, teaching in the classroom how to play football, the draw play, the face mask. Everyone's face mask, the bar is the size of Paul Brown's pinky, the width of Paul Brown's pinky, because they asked him, because the first face mask they built, like some kind of hockey thing. They had this bear cage, and then Otto Graham had this clear plastic piece across his face, that he said he had trouble breathing behind. It was like the Halloween mask of the 70s, And Paul Brown told Riddell, because he had a contract with Riddell, I want the face mask, and I want it to be no wider. The bar is no wider than my pinky. And they measured that. And to this day, all the face masks are no wider than Paul Brown's pinky, and the practice schedule. Paul Brown invented that. the helmet, the mic, the everyone knows about the radio in the helmet, so that he could talk to the players, calling the plays. When in an era when players still called their own plays, he called the plays. He used the guard system because of the radio. Ratterman said, I can't think of his first name, but Ratterman, the quarterback, said he had to stand outside the huddle and kind of go side to side like you're tuning in a radio.
Right.
So you could hear. But yeah, it was George Ratterman. So yeah, it's just all these things, and the way NFL football life does it is they say Paul Brown added color to the league. A black and white, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, rugby style football was turned on its head. He invented the passing pocket. That was Paul Brown's invention. Have the players fork up, and that becomes the pocket. And all of Paul Brown's disciples as assistant coaches who went on to win the first, 15 Super Bowls, because here's the guys that came from that: Don Shula,
Yep.
Bill Walsh, Chuck Noll. Yeah, it's amazing the players that came from that, his philosophy, his teachings. Tom Landry, I think, even came out of Paul Brown. I think he was I know he played for the Giants too, but I think
he did, and he was an assistant coach as well. I don't know if he had ties with Paul Brown, though. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but I know those are the big three, because Don Shula was the defensive back for the Browns, and Chuck Noll was the famous guard who would swap guards every other play. He would run the play in. So, these are all guys that learned how to coach. And of course, Bill Walsh was an assistant under Paul Brown. And you watch Bill Walsh's story in football life, he talks about how the very first play when they played the Cincinnati Bengals was an old Cleveland Browns or Cincinnati Bengals play, triple pass. And the tight end for the Browns, Bob Trumpy, said, Walsh has been thinking about that play, that first play, since he basically quit the Browns because he didn't get the head coaching job, the Bengals, because he didn't get the head coaching job from the Browns. He had that play waiting for him in the Super Bowl. And that was a personal Super Bowl, Super Bowl 16 for Bill Walsh. So yeah, it's fascinating to see all the things that Paul Brown has done. Bob, I know we kept you way too late tonight. You look like you're about done. What you have going on in the Bayou Blitz tonight?
We're just gonna preview the Saints Browns game. Talk about the remaining 2 scenarios. One is very simple, but believe it or not, folks, the Saints still have a way to the playoffs if they lose on Saturday. It'll make your head hurt, but I'll go through it. Outside of that, just preview the Browns game. Just Brandon and I, no guests tomorrow. And listen, I'll say it on tomorrow's show too. Merry Christmas to you, Alan, and to all your family. We love you. We have been close for a long time now. Merry Christmas to all you viewers as well. Hopefully you tune into the Bayou Blitz. But in case you don't, I have my opportunity to say it now. Merry Christmas to everybody out there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be a cold Christmas, which I'm not complaining about because I hate warm Christmases. It just doesn't feel right. But it's gumbo weather. Speaking of Jimmy Gumbo, it's gumbo weather. So I'm gonna have some gumbo cooking this weekend. We're gonna do that Friday. Everybody have a very Merry Christmas. I'm looking forward to this Christmas because last Christmas I wasn't even in this house. I was in a rental, and
that's right.
We could not put up a Christmas tree. We didn't have any decorations, and Christmas really sucked. It didn't feel like Christmas. It felt like just an ordinary day. So Christmas threw up in my house this year. and it's got stuff everywhere. And I'm quoting every Christmas movie I can think of. So yippee ki and don't shoot your eye out, and have a Merry Christmas. And be sure and join us. I know you're going to be here when you leave in your RV next month. YouTube, wish all the best for Will. This is the best time for Will, too, because Santa's still magical, and Christmas morning they can't wait to get those presents. So get ready to wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to hear the sound of toys going off. And I always think about my own Christmases when that happens too. Maybe the next show, especially if we lose this Sunday, I'll talk about some of the crap my brother used to pull on Christmas morning, because he was hilarious on Christmas. I'll be honest with you. I'll just tell you this much: my parents would go to bed, and it was like they closed the door, and the minute the door went click, my brother's eyes went ding, wide open. He was ready. He was looking like, yeah, it's time. It's time to get up. Thank you guys for joining us. And Bob, wish you all the best. Merry Christmas. Wish your family Merry Christmas. And we'll see you next time under the dome. Good night, everybody.